I'm going to get started since it's noon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jason Rosenberg, and it's a real joy and an honor to be here with you this either early afternoon or late morning, depending on where you're calling in from. I also want to thank Rabbi Goldwasser for having set this up and the URJ for supporting it and enabling it. And I do want to begin with this chant. It's a fairly simple chant, and you won't need to be able to sing well to sing along. And if it's possible, I really encourage you to sing along. The point isn't just the sounds in your ears, but the feeling of the chant itself. So if you don't know it, hopefully you'll be able to catch on to it quickly. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha
Alexa off.
reacha kamocha. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. Welcome, everyone, and invite you all to take a few deep breaths. And just take them however they naturally come to you. Just let them be as deep as they naturally want to be without forcing them. And now see if, as you're breathing, you notice there being even the slightest pause in between the in-breath and the out-breath, and then the out-breath and the in-breath. Right at the top and bottom of your breath, you'll probably notice a quarter of a second or more of just stillness. And again, just see if you can notice that. And don't try and force it, but notice if possibly just paying attention to it helps it expand slightly so the pauses grow. Just take a few deep breaths, trying to hold that balance of noticing without controlling your breath.
Mhm. People seem to be.
It's inevitable and natural and even right that while we're trying to pay attention to anything, especially something as simple as our breath, other thoughts are going to distract us. Something's going to be coming up in our field of attention, a sound, a memory, an anxiety, something. So when that happens, you haven't failed at meditation. It's just part of the meditation. And what I invite everyone to do in those moments, when you notice something else has grabbed your attention, just maybe even literally welcome it. I always say, imagine it's a friend who showed up a little bit too early for a dinner party you're having. Very quickly, oh, so glad you're here. Give me just a second. And then just go back to what you're doing. Just breathing in and out, paying attention to the breath, those slices of time in between breath, and then lovingly welcoming and temporarily dismissing your distractions. Now I'm going to invite, excuse me, now I'm going to invite everyone to think of someone that you love, anyone that you love. Doesn't even have to be a person, I suppose. Could be a pet or anyone. But someone that you dearly love, but who has recently, in some way, disappointed or annoyed you. Probably won't be hard to think of someone. Probably anyone we love has at some point recently disappointed or annoyed us. That's reality. But just think of someone and some specific way in which they have hurt you, disappointed you, annoyed you, or anything like that. And try as much as you can to really feel that again. To kind of call up that sense memory of what it felt like to be hurt or disappointed or annoyed by this person. Now, as we continue breathing, still picturing that person in our minds, as we breathe in, I invite you to say, breathing in, it's okay. And then as you breathe out, breathing out, I forgive you. Breathing in, it's okay. Breathing out, I forgive you. Breathing in, it's okay. Breathing out, I forgive you. Just a little more. Breathing in, it's okay. Breathing out, I forgive you. Hareini mikabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha Hareini mikabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. If you can, please join me. Hareini mikabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. Hareini mikabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. There's a group that apparently meets, or at least used to, I hope they still do, every Friday afternoon in Jerusalem. They get together and they have this spiritual practice they do. They go around the table, and each person at the table offers an example of something that someone that week did to annoy them in a big or a little way. And then everybody else around the table has to take a turn trying to think of a reason they may have done that would cast it in a kinder light. The most obvious example is someone complains that they were cut off and almost run off the road on the highway the other day. And the first person says, well, maybe they were on the way to the hospital because their partner was in a medical emergency and they were rushing there. And someone else says, maybe they just had the worst day ever and they were just so distracted. And if they realized they had done it, they'd be apologetic to you. And on and on. And then they switch. Next person offers their annoyance, and they all take turns explaining it. And the goal isn't to actually explain it properly. It's not to guess what it was. It's just to train ourselves to give people the benefit of the doubt, to try and see things in the kindest light. And the reason for that has absolutely nothing to do with that other person. It's got everything to do with ourselves and how much better it usually feels to be kind and loving and forgiving than to be angry and spiteful, even if that anger is justified. I personally don't think I've ever benefited from my own anger. I don't think I've ever made a better decision because of my anger. I don't think I've ever spoken better to someone because of my anger or irritation. David Cater, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, pointed out what I was going to point out, which there's a problem with what I was just having us do about forgiving someone. Judaism rightfully focuses more on teshuvah than on forgiveness, on repentance. And there's so many treatises and sermons given about the steps of teshuva. Famously, Maimonides really define this in the strictest way. You don't just ask for forgiveness. If you want to be forgiven for something, you have to be willing to first realize what you did wrong and apologize to the person and try and make restitution for what you did, and then get to the point where you'll never do it again. There are a lot of steps to get before you have a right to ask someone for forgiveness. And there was a lot to say about this I don't have time for, but I love that. I really, really value and embrace and teach our community's approach, our tradition's approach to repentance before forgiveness. But if there's a downside to our focus on that, it often leads us away from talking about the power of forgiveness itself. I don't have the right to ask you for forgiveness until I've done teshuvah. And that's an absolute truth in Judaism. I do have the right to forgive you before you do teshuvah if I want to. Forgiving you doesn't mean absolving you of responsibility. It just means I'm going to stop being angry about it for now. At least that's one way to think about forgiveness. I have learned constantly, more and more as I grow, and as I grow older, that I simply can't be the version of me that I want to be when I'm angry. I don't like that guy. He is, in the language of our tradition, a jerk. I'm not speaking generically here. You might not be. I am. I don't want to be in that guy's head. I don't want to hang out with that guy. I want to be loving. I know I will do fewer things wrong. I will have less to do teshuvah for if I lead with love. And so I try and find practices that make me kinder and more forgiving and more loving. That chant that I led us in a couple of times is a chant from the Baal Shem Tov, the Besh, the founder of Hasidic Judaism. And supposedly, this was a chant which he used before he prayed every morning. Here I am, ready to accept the sacred obligation given to me by the Creator to love your fellow human as yourself. He would not let himself pray. He would not let himself try and approach God until he had convinced himself that his obligation was to love everyone. He didn't wait until he loved everyone. He waited until he believed that he had to. We can't get close to God until we get close to each other. And we can't, I don't think, get close to God until we get close to our best selves. And these are all interwoven and interconnected. I pray that I have the strength during this month of Elul to practice loving kindness, to really work on strengthening that muscle, so that when I do teshuvah this month and during the Yamim Noraim, it will be knowing that I'm less likely to make those same mistakes, to miss the mark in the same way next year. And because I don't have a shofar with me, I'll end with just a couple more rounds of the chant, and again, I invite you to join me if you're comfortable doing so. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat haborei ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha reacha kamocha. Shana Tova Mitaka, everyone. A good and a sweet new year to us all. Thank you.
Thank you.